Before you start this video, ask yourself one question: what would you do if someone tried to erase your existence without you even noticing? I still remember the way the air felt inside that cold room, heavy, almost metallic. The walls were painted an old shade of beige, like time itself had given up on them. I could hear the faint ticking of a clock somewhere behind me, and every tick felt like a reminder that my life was about to change forever. I sat at the long wooden table, my hands clasped together, trying not to shake. The lawyer unfolded the will slowly, as if he enjoyed dragging out the moment. Then my uncle leaned forward, his elbows on the table, eyes like a blade about to strike. He didn't wait for any formal introduction. He didn't even let the lawyer speak first. He simply looked at me calm, almost casual, and said, "You don't deserve anything." Just like that. 7 words. They felt like an execution. I remember blinking slowly, as if that would help me process what I had just heard. Maybe I had misheard. Maybe he was joking. Maybe this was some twisted test. But then he smirked, leaned back on his chair, and repeated it. "Nothing. You get nothing." I felt an invisible weight push on my chest. My throat burned. I didn't know whether to cry, scream, or stand up and leave. All I knew was that in that moment, I was no longer family. I thought about my father, his voice, his laugh, the way he believed in me. He used to say, "The family will take care of you when I'm gone." But that day, sitting in that lifeless room, I realized he had been wrong. The lawyer read the document aloud, his voice flat, emotionless. My father's will sounded like a story that didn't belong to me anymore. Property. Savings. Business shares. A lifetime of sacrifice all disappearing sentence by sentence. There was a moment where I actually stopped listening. I stared at the window instead. Outside, the sky was bright, almost painfully blue, and for a strange second I thought it was mocking. My uncle spoke again, his voice echoing. "You never earned anything. You were just his favorite. For years, I had worked in the family business and paid. I was told it was for my future. I started at 17, waking up at 4:50 a.m. every day, opening the small warehouse before sunrise, loading boxes, cleaning restrooms, fixing broken shelves. I spent nearly a decade giving everything I had. They said it would all be worth it. They said the business would one day be mine. But when my father died last year, May 14, 2024, at 9:37 p.m. everything changed. It was like his death pressed some invisible switch, and suddenly I was no longer the nephew who worked hard. I was the outsider, the threat, the one who had to be erased. What hurt most wasn't the money. It wasn't the property. It was the silence that followed his sentence. No one defended me. Not one voice. My cousin, who was sitting across the table, looked down at his phone pretending to scroll, but I could see his hand trembling. My aunt avoided eye contact completely. Even the lawyer looked uncomfortable, but didn't say a word. No one said, "That's not fair." No one said, "He deserves better." I waited for someone, anyone. But there was nothing, just that suffocating silence. I remembered the long nights I had spent sleeping at the warehouse because I couldn't afford an apartment, the broken heater, the smell of gasoline that soaked into my clothes. I remembered the day I turned 25 and my father gave me $500 and a used car as a birthday gift. He whispered, "Just a little longer. I'm planning something big for you." I believed him. I kept working. I kept sacrificing. But now here I was 29 years old with nothing to show for it except calloused hands and a bank account with $642 in it. My uncle looked at me again, and this time his eyes didn't have anger in them. They had satisfaction, as if this moment was something he had been waiting for. As if he needed to watch me break to finally feel superior. He said, "You are always too emotional. Business isn't about feelings." His words stayed in the air like smoke from a fire I didn't start. I felt my eyes burning but refused to cry. I pressed my nails into my palm under the table. I remembered every promise my father ever made. Every morning I woke up believing I was building a future. Every sacrifice I made believing I had a place in this family. And suddenly I realized something terrifying. Maybe my father didn't lie to me. Maybe he was lied to. Maybe he trusted them. Maybe he believed they would honor his wishes. Or worse, maybe he planned something and they erased it. At that moment, I decided I wouldn't remain silent. If they wanted war, then they just declared it. But inside, my voice felt small, fragile. And the truth was, I had no idea just how far they had gone to keep me out. I walked out of that room without saying a single word. The hallways smelled like old paper and cheap coffee, and I remember hearing distant voices coming from another office, laughing about something meaningless. It felt unreal that people could still laugh. I stepped outside and the sunlight hit me with a sudden brightness that made me squint. I stood on the sidewalk for almost 2 full minutes, not moving, just breathing, just trying to remember what my life felt like before that moment. Cars passed, people rushed to their destinations. A bus stopped 5 meters from me and released a burst of hot air that smelled like exhaust fumes and dust. Everything around me was loud and alive while I felt strangely invisible. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. $642 in my bank account. 29 years old. No apartment. No car since the one my father had given me broke down last February, and fixing it would have cost more than it was worth. And no family. At least not anymore. I started working in the family business when I was 17. My uncle's decision, not mine. It was after high school, during a dinner that was supposed to celebrate my graduation. We were at a small Italian restaurant on 18th Street. I can still smell the garlic and wine in the air. My father told me, gently, that college wasn't possible yet. Not financially. But the family business, he said, would help me grow. I felt disappointed at first, but then hopeful when he added, "This is temporary. 2 years at most. Then I'll help you go wherever you want." I promise, I believed him. I always believed him. My uncle, however, didn't congratulate me at dinner. He just said, "Time to get real." No more dreams. That night I went to bed thinking I could prove him wrong. I thought I could make him proud someday. I was wrong. The first 2 years were the hardest. Waking up at 4:50 a.m. every day, even on Sundays. I cleaned toilets, stacked boxes, carried heavy equipment down narrow staircases while my arms trembled. Sometimes I'd fall asleep in the back of the warehouse during my 15-minute break. No paycheck, just investment in your future, as my uncle liked to call it. I ate instant noodles, cheap bread, whatever I could afford. In 2016, I found a small studio apartment for $350 a month. It was cold in winter and humid in summer. Sometimes mold formed on the ceiling like black clouds, and when I showered, water dripped from the light fixture above. But it was independence. My father visited once. He looked around and said nothing, but his eyes were sad. I could tell he felt guilty. He hugged me before leaving and whispered, "Hold on a little longer. I'm preparing something for you." Those were his exact words. I wanted to believe him, so I stayed. In 2018, my uncle promoted me, at least that's what he called it. He gave me a thin blue folder and said I was now operations manager. It sounded impressive, but it meant more work, more stress, and still no salary. He claimed the business was restructuring, that soon the borders would open for new deals, that I'd be at the front line when everything changed. I started managing logistics, deliveries, paperwork. I learned how to balance invoices, contact suppliers, solve problems when shipments were delayed, some nights. I slept on a thin mattress behind the supply shelves. My phone filled with unanswered messages from friends. "Come out with us. Where have you been? Did you disappear?" I didn't disappear. I was being buried slowly and quietly. I finally received my first paycheck in July 2019, $1,200. It felt like a miracle. That same month, my father told me he was proud. He said, 5 more years and the company will be yours. It's already arranged. That sentence kept me alive for the next 3 years. I worked harder, stayed longer, sacrificed everything. Relationships ended because I had no time. My health declined. I developed insomnia, stress rashes, a constant headache that lived just behind my eyes. But I kept going. Because I believed him. Because I trusted him. Because blood, I thought, meant loyalty. Then came January 2023. I heard whispers that something had changed. Documents were signed. Shares were moved. Lawyers visited the office twice. My uncle started avoiding me. My aunt stopped talking to me altogether. Each day felt colder. I felt something coming, like the pressure in the air before a storm. I asked my father about it, but his face tightened. "Don't worry," he said, "it's all under control." 3 months later, he was gone. Heart attack. I held his hand at 9:37 p.m. while hospital machines beeped behind me. His last words. "Protect what's yours." I didn't know what he meant then, but I do now. He must have known something was wrong. He must have felt it. The day after his funeral, my uncle took his office. His photo replaced my father's on the wall. The atmosphere in the building changed. People whispered more. Doors closed faster. I felt like a ghost moving through hallways I once thought of as my home. And today, when he told me I deserved nothing, I realized that maybe this wasn't sudden. Maybe they had been planning this for years. Maybe everything had always been a lie. The scariest part. I had proof, but I didn't know it yet. 2 days after the will reading, my uncle asked me to meet him at the warehouse. It was 6:10 a.m., still dark, the kind of darkness that feels like a warning. The lights inside buzzed with that old electric sound, flickering slightly as if even the building was tired of us. He stood near the loading dock, arms crossed, wearing the same navy coat he'd worn at the funeral. I could still smell the scent of that day on it: cologne, rain, and fake sympathy. He looked at me the way someone looks at a broken object they're tired of trying to fix. His voice was calm when he spoke, to calm. "Before you leave, I need something from you." I didn't respond. Every word I said these days felt like it'd be written down and used against me. He pulled out a folder, thick and sealed with a black clip. Then one sentence changed everything. "I want you to sign over full liability for the operational losses from last quarter." My stomach tightened hard. I blinked, trying to understand. "What losses?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. $178,000, he said. Just like that. As if naming a number was easier than naming a life. He claimed I had overseen shipments, managed budgets, signed off on transactions. Therefore, I could take responsibility for the financial deficit. Technically, he said, adjusting his tie, you were in charge. "So this is your mess." Those words felt surgical, cold, and selective. He didn't dare mention that I received no salary during that period, nor that all decisions were made by him and approved by my father. I asked why he wanted this. He looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Because after this, you don't exist in this family anymore. And I want to make sure you leave with nothing, not even your name." I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. My hands started shaking. That was his real goal, not just to exclude me, but to erase me. He offered a deal. If I signed the papers, he'd give me $5,000 and a month to leave town quietly and respectfully. If I refused, he threatened legal action. He suggested that I could face trial for financial negligence and that my lack of evidence and money would bury me for decades. I felt like I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just betrayal, it was execution with a smile. I didn't sign, not yet. I told him I needed time to think. His smile widened, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Of course," he said, stepping closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "But remember, everyone here is tired of you." Then he walked away slowly, leaving the folder on the metal table near the door. The moment he disappeared into his office, tears finally fell. I didn't cry loudly. I didn't collapse. I just stood there and let the reality sink into my bones. I knew I couldn't sign. If I did, my father's legacy would die with me. But if I refused, I risked everything, whatever future I still had, whatever dignity was left. I spent the next 3 nights sleeping at a friend's place, barely speaking, barely eating. My mind was racing. My heart felt like it had grown heavier. I could hear my father's voice, "Protect what's yours," so I went back to the warehouse after hours. I still had the access code. I searched through cabinets, drawers, computer files, anything that could help me. At 1:43 a.m., on the second night, I found something that made my hands go completely numb. A folder hidden inside the safe behind my uncle's office painting. It wasn't locked. That was the first surprise. The documents inside were dated 2023. They showed something my uncle never expected me to see. Private messages. Confidential emails with lawyers, meetings with investors, signature transfers, and then for signed pages. My father's will, not the one I heard at the lawyer's office. Another one, dated 6 months later, and this one had my name on it, in clear letters. Primary heir, my father had changed his mind. He had left everything to me, the business, the property, the accounts. But that version vanished the day he died. I felt the room spin around me. I had been told I didn't deserve anything. I was told I was just an emotional liability. But here was the truth. I wasn't meant to be erased. I was meant to continue. That will was his last decision. That will was his real voice. And someone deliberately silenced him. As I stood alone in that quiet office, documents in my shaking hands, I realized something heavy. This wasn't just betrayal. This was theft. And maybe even murder. My father had died unexpectedly. But what if it wasn't unexpected to everyone? I looked at the clock on the wall, 2:08 a.m. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for him, for the truth, for everything they thought they had buried. That night, I made a promise. I would not leave quietly. I left the warehouse at 2:37 a.m., walking quickly but trying to look calm in case any cameras were still active. The air outside was freezing, sharper than usual, as if the night itself was warning me that things were about to get even worse. I didn't go home. I didn't even know if I had a home anymore. Instead, I walked to the only place where my father used to say he could think clearly, the small park on the east side of town, next to the old church with the broken bell tower. I sat on one of the cold wooden benches, the documents resting on my lap, and waited for sunrise like it would tell me what to do. But the longer I stayed there, the more I realized something. I was in danger, real danger. I looked at the pages again, hands shaking slightly. My father's signature was there. His handwriting, neat as always. The revised will clearly mentioned me. The property, the business, even a bank account I didn't know existed. A trust fund with my name on it. It felt unreal. For a moment, I wondered if I was dreaming, if grief was playing tricks with my mind. But then I saw the lawyers' names, the investors, the transfer logs. It was all real. And it had all been hidden. The most important document was dated April 20th, 2023, 24 days before my father died. That was the moment that broke something inside me. I remembered that week. My father had been quiet, distant. He'd asked me to come to his office after hours. He closed the blinds, sat down, and said, "Things will change soon. Don't lose faith." I thought he was talking about the business. I thought he was preparing to retire and finally give me the future he promised. I didn't know he was rewriting his entire legacy, and that someone else was already preparing to erase it completely. The sun began to rise at 5:52 a.m. I didn't sleep. I didn't blink much either. My thoughts moved like machinery, cold, precise, focused. If I told the truth to the wrong person, everything could vanish again. If I hid it, I could be accused of forging the documents. I needed help, but not from friends. Not from family. I needed someone neutral. Someone who wasn't afraid of a fight. So I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. A man my father once mentioned, someone he said was one of the few people who understood integrity. His name was Daniel Shaw, 44 years old, based in Ridgeview City, 2 hours away from town. I had only met him once. But I trusted my father's instincts, even from beyond the grave. I arrived at his office that same afternoon. I looked exhausted. My clothes smelled of dust and old paperwork. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. Daniel listened silently as I explained everything from the unpaid years to the new will I found hidden. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and just stared at me for a long time. Then he spoke quietly. "What I'm about to tell you might hurt more than anything your uncle has ever said." He opened a drawer and pulled out a small file. Inside were copies of hospital reports. My father's medical records. That's when Daniel said something I'll never forget. "Your father was declared at high risk 3 months before he died. He should have been in assisted medical care." I felt something collapse inside me. "What do you mean?" I asked. Daniel handed me another paper. "Your uncle was informed of this. Legally. Officially. He didn't tell you." I went numb. My uncle had known my father was deteriorating and he said nothing. Worse, he took control of the business while my father was still alive and vulnerable. While I was still working until exhaustion every day, thinking everything was progressing normally. But that wasn't the worst part. Daniel looked at me, eyes steady. "Did your uncle pressure your father to sign anything while he was on medication?" My mouth went dry. I remembered how distant my father seemed during his last weeks. I remembered how his hands sometimes shook when he tried to write. I remembered how one afternoon he stopped mid-sentence during a conversation and said, almost confused, "I feel foggy lately." I thought it was stress. I thought it was age. I never thought it could be manipulation. Daniel leaned forward. If he signed anything while impaired, it might be considered invalid, especially if he didn't have full mental clarity. He paused. "Do you understand what that means?" I did. If proven, my uncle's will, the one read in that cold room, could fall apart completely. A sudden realization hit me hard. That's why they needed me gone. Not just silent, gone. No signature, no voice, no claim. I wasn't just inconvenient. I was the last threat to their control. I walked out of Daniel's office feeling both hopeful and terrified. I finally understood the scale of what I was up against. This wasn't just family conflict. This was deliberate erasure. An entire history rewritten. A father's last wish stolen. And maybe a crime hiding beneath it all. As I stood outside, looking at the sky turning grey again, one thought anchored itself deep in my chest. They weren't afraid that I deserved nothing. They were afraid that I discovered everything. For the first time in months, I felt like the truth had a pulse. Like my father's voice was still somewhere in the world, waiting to be heard. I walked back to my friend's apartment with the documents inside my backpack, zipped twice, wrapped in a plastic folder, as if I were protecting something sacred. Sleep didn't come easily, but exhaustion eventually dragged me under. When I woke up, it was already late morning, almost 11:30 am, and sunlight spilled across the room through half-open curtains. For a brief moment, I felt calm, but then my phone vibrated. 10 missed calls. All from the same number. The warehouse. I ignored them. I wasn't going back, not yet. Instead, I opened my laptop and started scanning the documents into encrypted files. I uploaded them to 3 separate cloud drives, each with a different password, just in case. My father used to say, if something is important to you, make sure it can't vanish in a single breath. I finally understood what he meant. That afternoon, I received an email from Daniel, my lawyer. It was brief. I need you to come in. Important. My pulse quickened. I arrived at his office an hour later. He didn't waste time. He showed me something that made my hands go cold. My uncle had already filed a claim against me. 3 accusations: financial negligence, breach of duty, and attempted fraud. The date: yesterday morning, the same morning I found the hidden will. He had prepared everything before he even spoke to me about signing the papers. He knew I might find something. He was sealing every door before I even reached them. It wasn't just a threat. He was already trying to bury me. Daniel didn't panic. He didn't look worried. Instead, he said, "This proves one thing, we're getting close." Then he leaned forward and asked the question that would change everything. "Does your father have any recorded voice messages from his final months?" Anything he said that we could prove wasn't normal behavior. I searched my phone for every voicemail, every recording, every voice memo I could find. Then I found one, dated May 9th, 2024, 5 days before his death. I remembered that moment. I was exhausted from work and didn't answer his call, so he left a message instead. At the time, I barely listened to it. I thought it was just him checking in, but when I played it now, I heard something else entirely. His voice sounded strained, slow, like he had to search for words. "Son, they want me to sign more papers. I don't like them. I think they're hiding something. Keep your eyes open. Don't trust, then silence." He never finished the sentence. The message cut off abruptly, as if someone had entered the room, or as if he hesitated, afraid of leaving the evidence. Daniel listened carefully, his expression unreadable. When the message ended, he whispered, "This might be enough." Hope rose in me. But before I could speak, Daniel added, "Unless someone wants this message gone," and that's when everything changed. 2 hours later, I returned to my friend's apartment. As I approached the building, I saw it immediately. A black car parked across the street. Windows tinted. Engine running. I pretended not to notice and went inside. The hallway smelled of paint and dust. I walked up the stairs slowly, every muscle tense. When I reached the door, I felt the air shift. Something was wrong. I opened it carefully and froze. The apartment had been searched. Drawers open, cushions thrown, papers scattered. Someone had been here and they weren't subtle. My backpack was untouched on the bed, but that only meant one thing: they didn't need it. They were looking for something specific. And I had already uploaded it. My stomach tightened with a cold realization. They weren't late. I was early. I backed away from the door, heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I knew I couldn't stay. I couldn't go home. I couldn't trust anyone. I walked down the stairs, trying to keep my breathing steady. Outside, the black car was gone. But something else caught my eye. On the windshield of my friend's car, a folded paper. I took it slowly, palms sweating. One sentence. Handwritten. "You're not the only one who knows the truth." No name. No signature. Just that. A warning or an invitation. And that terrified me more than anything else. Because if someone else knew, then someone else had been hiding. Somebody inside the family. Somebody who had been waiting for the right moment to speak or to betray. I walked away from the building and kept walking. I didn't care where. I just knew I couldn't stop. For the first time, I wondered if survival didn't mean silence but exposure. Maybe the only safety was in being loud, very loud. Maybe the secret was already too big to keep. I didn't know where I was going until I realized I was standing in front of the one place that still felt real. My father's grave. I looked at his name carved into the stone. The dates. The final dash that represented his entire existence. And I whispered, "I'm ready to fight. But I need help," and for a single moment I thought I felt wind touch my shoulder. Like an answer. If you're still here, it means you feel there's something in your life that hasn't been explained yet. So do this now. Hit the like button, comment "I won't be erased," and share this with someone who deserves to know the truth. This video isn't just a story. It's a mirror. The cemetery was nearly empty, just a few scattered flowers laying over different graves, petals slowly being carried away by the wind. I stood in front of my father's headstone for so long that I lost track of time. A strange calmness surrounded me, not comfort, but something close to clarity. The kind of clarity that only comes when there is nothing left to lose. My father had always said that truth is like fire. It can burn you, but it can also light the way. I wasn't sure which one I was walking toward. Maybe both. At 6:14 p.m., my phone vibrated. A message. Unknown number. Just 3 words, "Check your email." My breath caught. For a moment, I feared it was my uncle. Or worse, someone on his payroll. But when I opened my inbox, what I found sent a shock through my entire body. A single email, subject line, "He didn't want this," no name, no signature, no sender info, just a message and an attached audio file. I hesitated before pressing play. Then I heard it. My father's voice. Different from the message I found earlier, stronger, clearer. The recording was dated April 22nd, 2023, 1 month before his death. "If you're listening," he said, "then something went wrong. They want control, not protection. They call it business, but it's greed. I changed the documents. I trusted the wrong people. Be careful who you trust, especially the one who looks calm in the storm." Then it ended. I played it 3 more times. I knew that voice. I knew the way he spoke when he was hiding fear behind strength. He wasn't confused. He wasn't medicated. He was alert, fully aware, and aware enough to warn someone. But who did he send it to? I clicked the email details. It had been forwarded. Originally sent to another address entirely. Someone had kept it for over a year. I stared at the sender field. It was blank, but the forwarded IP was local. That meant one thing: the person who sent this was close. Very close. My pulse quickened. Questions spun through my head so fast they began to blur. Who was it? Why now? Why keep it hidden for so long? Were they helping me or using me? I didn't have answers. Just a chilling thought: someone in the family might be ready to speak. Or betray, or both. That night, I didn't dare go back to my friend's place. Instead, I stayed in a cheap motel on Lincoln Avenue, room 106, $28 a night, sheets rough like sandpaper. I barely slept. I played my father's message over and over, imagining how he must have felt when he recorded it. Fear, determination, a man standing at the edge of something he couldn't outrun. The thought that he might have known what was coming made me feel both closer to him and farther from peace. At 3:17 a.m., I made a decision. If someone out there knew the truth and was ready to speak, I had to find them before my uncle did. So I went back to the warehouse. Again. 3rd time in 3 days. But this time I didn't sneak through the side door. I walked straight through the front entrance. It was silently empty, deserted in a way that felt intentional, like someone had cleaned the entire place of witnesses. Every light inside was off except one in the office. My uncle's office. I walked toward it slowly, the air thickening with every step. My heartbeat felt like footsteps behind me, like someone or something was following. When I reached the office door, I didn't knock. I pushed it open. The room was dark except for the yellow glow of a desk lamp. Papers were stacked neatly. Too neatly. A place stripped of chaos is a place prepared for inspection. My eyes scanned every shelf, every drawer, every inch of the wall behind the desk. Then my gaze landed on a single object, a small voice recorder sitting next to the lamp. Old, scratched, but still active, its red light blinking steadily. I picked it up, pressed play, static. Then a long pause. Then footsteps. Voices. My uncle's voice. My aunt's voice. And someone else. Someone young. They were talking about me. He's searching already. The papers won't be enough, my uncle said. We need him gone before he finds the rest, my aunt replied. Then the third voice, softer. What if he already knows? I froze. The voice sounded familiar. Too familiar. I couldn't place it at first, but my instinct didn't hesitate. That wasn't a stranger. That wasn't an employee. That wasn't someone distant. It was my cousin, the one who didn't look at me during the will reading, the one whose phone trembled in his hands, the one who avoided eye contact not out of guilt, but fear of what he already knew. I stopped breathing for a moment. My cousin was part of it. He had heard everything. He had been on the inside, all along. But then another thought struck me even harder. If he knew the truth, why send their mail? Why help me now? Unless he wasn't with them anymore. I stood there, holding the recorder like a detonator. My whole body was trembling, and for the first time, I realized the truth wasn't just buried. It was watching me. I thought that signing the last document would finally give me peace, but instead, it felt like opening a door to a room I wasn't prepared to enter. The law firm kept calling. There were unsettled matters, clauses that needed clarification. My uncle's words still echoed in every hallway I walked. You don't deserve anything. The more I tried to forget it, the louder it rang in my head, like someone was playing it through hidden speakers. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus. I started avoiding mirrors, because every time I saw my face, I imagined him looking at me with that cold expression, judging me, reminding me that I was nothing. I became a ghost inside my own home. I barely left my room, except to work just enough to survive. My fridge had nothing but water, bread, and cheap instant coffee. I told myself that I was saving money, but deep down, it felt like I was punishing myself, confirming his theory that I wasn't worth more. During one of those sleepless nights, I opened the only box I had brought from my grandfather's house. It still smelled like his old wooden desk, dusty, warm, familiar. Inside, I found something strange, an old notebook wrapped in newspaper from 1998, the year my parents died. The pages were filled with numbers, names, dates, short phrases, and something even stranger, notes about me. Pages full of observations like, he thinks no one sees his effort, but he always tries again, and one day he will look back and understand why this silence was necessary. I felt my throat close. I didn't know if I should read more, but I couldn't stop. There was a line underlined twice, the real inheritance isn't kept in the bank. And next to it, in smaller handwriting, it's held by the one who survived. My pulse quickened. I looked closer. I noticed something unusual. Some words were written in different ink, newer ink. Some dates didn't match my grandfather's handwriting. That's when I realized not all of it had been written by him. Someone had added notes later. Someone who knew me, who kept watching from a distance. The next morning, I brought the notebook to the lawyer. Her eyebrows raised immediately. She called someone from the firm, and they examined it for a long time. I sat there speechless, waiting, feeling like I was standing at the edge of something too big to understand. Finally, she looked at me with a tone I had never heard from her before, softer, almost afraid. This changes everything, she said. This wasn't mentioned in the will, but this could contest everything that was said in that room. My heart thumped like it wanted to break free from my chest. I asked her, does this mean he lied? She nodded gently. This means someone tried to control not only your future, but even your memories. Those words hit me harder than any insult ever had. I felt my hands tremble. I wasn't crazy. There was something hidden, a trap, a plan, and maybe my grandfather had expected me to find it. That night, I stared at the ceiling and finally allowed myself to ask the question I feared the most. Why me? Why the hatred? Why the silence? Why the manipulation? And then another question followed. What did they want me to become? I wondered if maybe they didn't want me poor. Maybe they didn't want me weak. Maybe they wanted me obedient. Or worse, invisible. I realized that hatred can sometimes be more dangerous than love because love at least admits your existence. Hatred tries to erase it. And for the first time, I understood that this wasn't just about money. It was about identity, about power, about rewriting my story before I even had the chance to live it. As I held that notebook close to my chest, I understood something important. The inheritance was never about land or money, it was about truth. And I knew that if I continued, if I dared to investigate further, I might lose everything. But for the first time in my life, I felt ready to fight. Even if it meant standing alone. The lawyer called me back 3 days later. Her voice was firm but low, as if someone else could be listening. "You need to come to the house," she said. Now, I didn't even ask why. I just went. The drive took an hour, but it felt like I was traveling backward in time past every version of myself I had tried to leave behind. When I arrived, the air was colder than usual. The windows were shut, but I swear the house was breathing. I walked inside, and every step echoed like the floor remembered me. The lawyer stood near the old study room, the one my grandfather used to call the room of decisions. A carpenter and a technician were already working on the wooden floor. They had found something unusual, a difference in sound when they tapped beneath the desk area. Hidden, deliberate. A part of the house I had walked over thousands of times, but never truly seen. I watched in silence as they lifted a section of the floor. Dust rose like ghosts. Beneath it was a small metal box, locked, untouched by time. My heartbeat felt louder than the tools being used to open it. When it clicked open, the lawyer looked at me and said, "You should be the one to see it first." Inside, wrapped in a thick brown cloth, were dozens of letters. Some were sealed. Some were torn. Some were written by my grandfather, but others weren't. Different handwriting, different tone, different intentions. And then there were photographs, some of me as a child, but not from family gatherings. From distances. From shadows. Someone had been documenting my life since before I even had memory. Timestamps. Locations. Even conversations written word for word. One document stood out, a file labeled Plan B, in case he discovers. The lawyer's hand shook as she read it aloud. My uncle's name. Dates. Instructions. Manipulation strategies. Psychological pressure. Even phrases to use against me during the reading of the will. Like a script. My blood went cold. "You don't deserve anything." That line was there. Written. Prepared. Calculated. My legs felt weak. They had crafted that moment. My uncle hadn't spoken from anger, he had spoken from a plan. They wanted me to believe I was worthless. They wanted me to surrender without asking a single question. They wanted me to disappear from the story before I even realized I was inside it. As I read further, my vision blurred. I saw mentions of money I never knew existed, funds hidden in foreign accounts, properties under false names, even gold bars stored in a warehouse just outside the city. Millions, and yet they told me there was nothing left. That everything was gone. I felt a strange heat rising from my chest, anger, sadness, disbelief, and something else. A sense of awakening. Everything I had lost over the years, my confidence, my pride, my dreams, they hadn't just faded away. They had been extracted. Little by little. With precision. But the worst discovery wasn't financial. It was emotional. There was a line in one letter that hit me harder than any number. He must never feel chosen. He must never believe he mattered to his grandfather. I closed my eyes. For years, I had assumed silence meant absence. But now I saw it clearly. Silence had been strategy, distance had been design, and maybe love had been buried on purpose. I remembered my grandfather's quiet gaze, the way he sometimes looked like he wanted to say something but couldn't. Maybe he was protecting me in the only way he knew, creating a puzzle only the wounded version of me would be patient enough to solve. A test not of intelligence but endurance. The lawyer looked at me and said, "You understand what this means, right?" I nodded, though my voice failed. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. A new battle. A war for truth. And for the first time, I felt something powerful, almost sacred, growing inside me. I will not let them erase me. That night, I stood in the old kitchen staring at a single light bulb flickering above me. I whispered to the empty house, "I know what you were trying to tell me," and right then, I made a promise to my grandfather, and to myself. I wouldn't run. I wouldn't hide. I would find everything they tried to bury, even if it meant digging through every shadow of my past. The next morning felt different. Not lighter, just sharper, as if the air finally had edges. I woke up with a question burning in my mind. If everything was taken from me, what else do I have left to lose? That thought didn't make me sad. It made me fearless. I met with the lawyer again, and this time she wasn't the calm, distant professional I knew. She had the eyes of someone standing beside a storm. She showed me documents, bank statements, legal transfers, offshore accounts, all pointing to one undeniable truth. I wasn't just ignored. I was erased. My uncle and his circle had spent 11 years transferring and hiding what was meant for me. They didn't want the inheritance to disappear. They just wanted me to disappear. I felt something unlock inside me. I stopped speaking softly. I stopped apologizing in conversations. I stood taller. It was strange. The moment I realized I was truly alone was the exact moment I stopped feeling lonely. I asked the lawyer one simple question: "Can we fight this?" She looked at me and didn't smile, but she nodded slowly. "Yes," she said, "but it won't be easy. They will do everything to break you before this reaches court." I remember leaning back in my chair and answering in a voice that didn't feel like mine. They already tried. It didn't work. The weeks that followed felt like stepping into another version of reality, one where every shadow had a name and every silence had a price. I started investigating on my own. I visited old neighbors, former employees, distant relatives. Some avoided me. Some lied to me, and some finally talked, like Mrs. Wilkinson, my grandfather's former housekeeper. She closed the door of her apartment when she saw me, afraid someone might see us. She made tea with trembling hands and said, almost whispering, "I always knew this day would come." She told me about the closed-door meetings, the sealed envelopes, the instructions to never let me near certain files. But the detail that stayed with me was this: your grandfather wasn't silent because he didn't care. He was silent because he was surrounded. Those words pierced something deep inside me. All this time, I believed I hadn't mattered enough. But suddenly, another possibility emerged. Maybe I had mattered too much. Enough to become a threat. Enough to be controlled. Enough to be hidden from the truth that was rightfully mine. The legal battle began quietly. They didn't attack me directly, not at first. They tried to exhaust me. Letters, delays, lost documents, mysterious phone calls at night, even people warning me to move on before things get complicated. But I was no longer the person they expected me to be. Something had changed. Pain had changed its shape inside me. What once felt like a wound now felt like armor. I used every doubt they gave me to become sharper, stronger, more precise. But the turning point came when I reread the notebook, the one hidden under the floorboards. I found a line I hadn't noticed before. It was scribbled on the side of a page, easy to miss. When the time comes, he must stand alone. That's how he'll know he's ready. Those words sank into me like an anchor. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel scared of the silence. I didn't feel abandoned by the ones I lost. I felt guided by them. The loneliness I carried for years suddenly felt like proof that I had survived what they never thought I could survive. I started organizing the evidence like someone preparing for war. Files, dates, voices, places. A map of betrayal, but also a map of resistance. I realized that every time I thought I was breaking, I was actually collecting pieces. Pieces I would need. Pieces I would use. Pieces they never thought I'd find. And then, one evening, after hours of reviewing documents, I looked in the mirror and saw something I had never seen before. Not strength, not victory, not even peace. I saw the beginning of a person I had never met before, but one I was finally ready to become. The day of the trial arrived like a storm that everyone knew was coming but hoped would pass without touching them. Not me. I walked into that courtroom carrying every year of silence, every unanswered question, every night I cried thinking I had failed someone I loved. I didn't wear a suit. I wore the same coat I had worn on the day I left my grandfather's house years earlier, the day I felt like an orphan again. I wanted them to see what they tried to bury. Not a victim, not a lost heir, but proof that their plan had failed. My uncle sat across from me. Polished.